welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. It is Tuesday. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. We are here. We're going to talk real estate. We're going to talk politics. We're going to try and cover as much as we can. We are 1 week out from the presidential election and every other election that is out there, so I'm excited about today's show. Before we get going, I want to do a couple of quick shout-outs. Number one, to the Dodgers, who are up 3-0. We are one win away from bringing it home. So we wish them luck tonight. And if they need another one, then we'll go again. Secondly, I want to just remind everybody one more time, the Evening for Autism charity event that I'm hosting at my home in Newport Beach is this Saturday night, rain or shine. There's not going to be any rain. Trust me, we are going to have a great time. We have a super lineup with 3 bands, 7 restaurants, 8 bars, 400 guests from all walks of life. Please come and support. If you can't make it, please go to the website one way or the other, www.eveningforautismsocal.com. With all of that said, I want to invite and welcome our esteemed guest, Scott Baugh, Republican nominee and candidate for U.S. Congress in the 47th District of the great state of California. Scott, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Barry, and I love that no BS on the intro. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're not going to screw around today. We're just going to get right to the heart of it.
Yeah, but I will see you on Saturday evening.
Awesome. Yeah, and so Scott will be there, many other politicians and all important folks from the community. We'll look forward to it. Yeah. So I want to, for those people who aren't that familiar with you, I want to rewind for a second before we fast forward to all the stuff that's important in today's world and just talk about how you got started and go back. I mean, you come from fairly simple means, put yourself through college and through law school, get out of law school, and then what was the plan?
Yeah, I don't know that there was a plan. There was survival, putting food on the table, but I grew up on a farm in Northern California, and we did chickens and rabbits and cows and horses and hay and all of that. And we weren't affluent, and then I didn't love the farm all that much, and so I decided to go to law school, and that's how I got into law school. And then I graduated there, graduated at the top of my class, and then I eventually ended up in Huntington Beach, California. It's just a beautiful place to live, a beautiful place to raise a family. And eventually I fell into politics.
And so you got into politics because somebody else got recalled, right? And then there was a seat that was open in the California state legislature.
Yeah, well, it actually works simultaneously or concurrently, really. Because Congressman Rohrabacher asked me to run to replace Doris Allen. She was being recalled, so on the same ballot, you get a recall, and then if the recall is successful, it's the top vote getter replaces. If the recall is not successful, the top vote getter doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And so all worked out, and then you get in the state legislature, and then rise through the ranks, I guess is the best way to describe it, and become the minority leader in the California state legislature.
Yeah, right. So you have a short window there because you only have 3 2-year terms in the California legislature. So in my third term, I became the Republican leader. And we had a lot of duties. We have to run elections, you have to run policy, you have to run the state budget, and it's a busy time.
And I mean, while California is certainly tilted Democratic as a whole, the fact of the matter is there's still things that have to get done in terms of the economy and the greater good, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I had a great working relationships with the Democrats. Antonio Villaraigosa was the speaker for 1 year. Bob Hertzberg was the speaker for another year. We worked together on budgets. We got the car tax eliminated. After I left, they restored it. But while I was there, we made sure the car tax was eliminated.
So then you finish you basically term out with the California State Legislature, and then back in Huntington Beach, and decide to get involved with the Republican Party, and then they make you the head of the party.
Sort of. I was still engaged in politics, and the chairman, Tom Fuentes, back then, he wanted to retire, and he asked me if I'd step in and take over for him. So in 2004, I had a little freedom for about 4 years, but in 2004, became chair of the Orange County Republican Party. And that's really where I established a lot of relationships across the whole country because, as you know, every governor, every senator, every presidential candidate comes through Orange County to raise money.
And at that time, really heavy red, really stronghold for the Republican Party here.
That's exactly right. It started changing in the year 2000, by the way. The most prominent change was in the city of Irvine. Irvine had 140,000 people in the year 2000. Fast forward to 2022, 24 now, they have about 310,000. And in that same period of time, Democrat registration went up by 40,000 votes. Republican registration went up by 700. So the county was mostly red back in 2000, but by the time 2022 came here, it was tilted blue.
And you think that's because people change their mind or their perceptions, or really people move into the area and have different philosophies?
I think it was significant demographic changes in the area. It was the growth of UC Irvine and the growth of the tech sector, and all of those things combined produced an upside down registration for Republicans.
Interesting. And so now, in today's world, we'll fast forward. You are running for U.S. Congress, 47th District, which covers Seal Beach, the coastal parts of Orange County, for those who aren't familiar, right? It's Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, Irvine, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa part of it? Or?
Sure, and don't forget Laguna Beach.
Yes, and Lagoon.
And the reason I say that is I guess the most beautiful district in the entire country. It really is a gorgeous district. And the registration, I ran 2 years ago, was severely outspent by Katie Porter. But back when I ran 2 years ago, the registration, Republicans were upside down by 7,600 votes.
Oh.
As of this morning, Republicans are up by 400 registrations.
And so there is a shift back, and then
is.
Certainly there are many important things on the ballot today, many important items that affect the economy and the border and all the other fun stuff that I want to get to.
Yeah.
Fun fact, though, just before we go on, your birthday is 4th of July.
It is.
Right? I was reading that. So my grandmother's birthday is 4th of July. You just don't meet a lot of people born on the 4th of July.
I bet one out of every 365 are.
That could be. That very well could be. So, well, good. So let's talk about today's race. I mean, it is a tight race. Certainly, we all hope that you win and that you're able to implement all the things that benefit everybody in Orange County.
Yeah.
And for me as a small business owner, I have a vested interest in making sure that the economy here in Orange County, as well as throughout the rest of the country, is strong. Let's start with talking about the border, right? I mean, we are not that far from the border, so you can't say it's not in your backyard here, and it's important to anybody and everybody.
Well, Barry, I walk precincts every week, and the number one topic that comes up, or actually top three topics, are the border or crime or inflation and the economy. But the border is a big deal. We have over 100,000 fentanyl deaths every year in this country. Imagine that. We have like 43,000 gun deaths every year. 60% of them are suicides and others are homicides, but we have over 100,000 deaths from opioids led by fentanyl, synthetic fentanyl that comes across our southern border. It's tearing families apart. We need to stop that.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, I mean, we've had the sheriff from Orange County, Don Barnes, on the show. Everybody's concerned about safety for their family and their children, and the border leads to other things going on that make it not as safe.
Well, sure, and not just the fentanyl, but we have actual criminals that are roaming our country that are convicted of rape and murder in other countries, and they get across our border because it's porous, and the Biden administration has done a terrible job there. In fact, I think they've done a terrible job on purpose. They wanted 15 million people to come in, but our country is less safe because of it, not to mention the tremendous burden cost on our social services and our education systems, our healthcare systems. It's just been a disaster.
And you think if Trump gets in and Republicans get a hold of the decision-making process in Washington, do you think it gets shut down pretty darn quick?
Barry, it'll be shut down on the first day.
Yeah.
When Joe Biden got elected, he opened it up on the first day, a bunch of executive orders, and Trump had the fewest illegal entrants his last year in office that we've ever had, and Biden reversed it on day one. So it'll be reversed by January 20th.
It's interesting, and then you combine that with other big economic factors and foreign affairs factors, right? I also believe that day one there'll be a completely different mindset as it relates to what's going on abroad.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think the Ukrainian war will be resolved within a few days. I think he's going to make that a priority and get it done. But
I think people's perception of this administration versus new administration is going to change on a dime.
oh yeah, yeah, and the foreign leaders in other countries, they know Trump is serious. In fact, Putin actually preferred Biden because he said you can't predict what Trump's going to do. Well, Trump comes in, he negotiates with that aura, and he gets things done. But let me go back a moment to the 15 million illegal immigrants that have come in, because it relates to real estate. This is a real estate show. What do you think that does to the demand for real estate?
Yeah.
It increases, and then it causes inflation, or the inflation of the real estate market, not to mention all the government spending, but all of these things added to it. And so now you have this crazy world where home affordability is becoming more and more difficult. It was already difficult, now it's more difficult. And then the administration, the Biden or Kamala, her proposal is to pump more money in and give people more money for down payments. And it's like, what is that going to do to the price of real estate? It's going to pump it up some more. So Henry Hazlitt, the economist from the 20th century, he said government programs have the opposite effect of their intended purpose. And if you want to come in and try to help people who can't afford a home, all you're doing is making home ownership more expensive. It's nutty.
Yeah, and don't get me started, because as a real estate guy, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you talk about things like rent control, and you try and implement rent control to protect the renter, which I'm all in favor of protecting the renter. But what you basically did by doing that is you made sure that everybody got the maximum increase that they could, because you're afraid that you can't get it in the future. And then that dovetails into the homeless issue, which is the more people that you have coming here either take up good housing that other folks that are citizens would normally have the opportunity to have, whether it's rent or buy other folks, and then you combine that with legislation that says you're not allowed to do background checks, or you're not allowed to charge a bigger deposit if you have bad credit or no credit, and now you have people that you just don't know who they are in your community.
Right.
And you could go all day.
All day.
Right? And if you read the false narrative or you listen to it on TV, people focus on pieces and snippets. And as a pragmatist, for myself, living in the real world as a businessman, you have to look at the cause and effect, right?
And rent control is one of the easiest ones to show the absurdity of it. So you come in because it's a good idea. Let's have rent control. Let's protect the renters. All you do is create a black market, because the market itself dictates the price of real estate. It's not a government program.
Right.
And so you end up creating these black markets where people are subletting their apartments because they got the original low rate, and they're making the bogey on the increased rent. They haven't lowered rents at all. They just changed who gets the income from it.
Yes, and then when you force the landlord to implement an increase just to keep up with their own expenses, what you then invite is overcrowding. And so the byproduct of that, we've seen it in the city of Santa Ana, where they implemented the most restrictive rent control in the state, and the values of property in Santa Ana have gone down now, though.
We know the solution to the housing issue here, and that's more housing.
Right.
We have a heavy demand and a lower or limited, a capped supply. If you increase the supply, the law of supply and demand goes into effect, and prices will stabilize.
Yeah, no question. And so then let's, I guess, shift to the overall economy, because it's important to everybody. People talk about inflation. People talk about cost of living, cost of food. All of these other things go into how much money I'm going to put in my pocket from my paycheck at the end of the day.
Yeah.
How do the Republicans view it, and how do you view it in terms of, changing that moving forward?
Yeah, well, Barry, that's a great question, because I think Republicans and Democrats are both responsible for this overspending. It's not limited to one party. I think the Democrats do a lot more of it. I think things like the Inflation Reduction Act was more like the Inflation Turbocharge Act.
Yeah.
It was really just a corporate giveaway. It was corporate welfare to a lot of solar companies that are still getting tax credits from it, to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars through that program. And so what does that do? That causes more and more inflation. So the cure to inflation is to make sure that our supplies are going, and we restrain our spending. And we have to restrain our spending. We're $35 trillion in debt. $1 trillion a year is going to interest payments on the debt. That's money that's not available to people like you or entrepreneurs out there that can go invest and create jobs and create more wealth, create more product, more goods and services. As you increase those supply of goods and services, you actually bring down the price of everything.
Yeah, and I struggle with the whole Kamala Harris, I'm going to give people a big tax credit to start a new business. And then I'm just going, well, I'll start a new business. I get a tax credit. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. New business should be started because there's a demand for the product or
Yes.
service, not because government subsidizes it.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it is the free market at the end of the day. And I believe it gets back to people's perception. If people's perception is that the economy is good and I am better off and I am moving forward, whatever that means to you, then you will act accordingly, right? If you feel like you're drowning and things cost more money, then you have different perception on what's going on. I think
Yeah.
that's probably one of the biggest things for people.
Yeah, and that's why this is such an important election coming up here, because as you know, the Trump tax cuts expire next year. And if they expire, that's like a several, multiple billion, hundreds of billions of dollars in tax increases on an economy that's already teetering a little bit, flirting with a little recession. And so if Kamala got elected or there's a Democrat control of Congress, those tax cuts won't get extended. So it's important that we maintain control of Congress, we get the Senate, and of course, Trump wins the White House.
Yeah, I mean, every seat, every vote counts, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So when you talk about taxes, because that's another thing that's important to everybody out there, everybody's paying taxes, and Harris talks about reducing taxes to the lower and the middle class people and then taxing the higher end people. Again, I feel like that's just a false narrative at the end of the day in terms of how it gets implemented. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I'm a big fan of Art Laffer. And you've heard of the Laffer curve, and a lot of people mistake the Laffer curve as saying, how to lower taxes. But the Laffer curve, the premise of the curve is this: there's an optimum level of taxation that produces the most amount of government revenue. So if you have, taxes at 0, you get 0 revenue. If you taxes at 100, you get 0 revenue. There's an optimal place in the middle where you maximize the revenue. And when you go over that, you just create all these disincentives and you punish business and you don't get more revenue. And that's the problem with all those programs. They seek to, with rhetoric, to attack the rich or to attack the haves and has not. And really the entire premise of the left is to create class and race warfare, and that's how they do it, with economics and taxation.
Yeah, and I think, look, if everybody does better, then everybody does better, right? And if business does better and you work for a company, you would want your business to be more successful.
Everybody wants a job to start.
Yeah.
And we need entrepreneurs out there creating jobs.
Yeah, and so I feel like, again, it'll be a function of what can get done by whoever party is in control at the end of the day, in terms of how they can push it forward, and then how quickly, too, right?
Yeah. I think you're going to see a lot happen with the Trump presidency and the Republicans in control of both houses. I think you're going to see a lot of regulatory reform. It's going to be done through budget reconciliation as opposed to changing the law, because you need 60 votes cloture out of the Senate to actually change the law. But they can do a lot of fixing and addressing the overburdensome regulations through reconciliation.
And I think, you tell me, but I think the Republicans in general that at least are in office in Washington want to make some change, want to see it happen.
Oh, sure, they do. Everybody wants to see prosperity for this country. And we don't like the flirting with the recession and all this inflation, and real people are hurting, making a choice between, are we going out to dinner, or are we staying home, are we going on a vacation, or are we staying home? Inflation, if you're making $100,000, which is about the average wage for people in Orange County, I mean, a lot of people make more and people make less, but if you're making about $100,000 and that 20% inflation hit, you just lost $20,000 of purchasing power, and it's like getting a pay cut of $20,000. And so when you lose $20,000 on an annual budget, you have to actually make some pretty tough decisions.
Yeah, no question. And so in terms of what happens in Washington at the end of the day and how that trickles back to your constituents here in Orange County, it is real. While some people say Orange County, you live in a little bit of a bubble, you're in paradise, the weather's nice and all of that, the fact of the matter is whatever happens there, it's going to show up here.
It does. It does affect it here. And of course, the policies in Sacramento affect what happens here, too.
No question.
And that's why we've seen so many people leave California to go to Texas or Tennessee or some other state where the regulations aren't so nutty.
Yeah.
Texas.
So let's shift gears for a second. I want to talk abortion for a second. It's not really real estate and it's not economy, but is important to a lot of people.
Sure. So I'll just explain to you my position on it, because my opponent seems to like to lie about my position on it. But the bottom line is we should not have a federal ban on abortion. A one-size-fits-all solution is a terrible thing for the federal government to do. We live in 50 different states. They have different cultures, different opinions, different styles, different personalities, and the states are sorting that out. If the federal government comes in and puts a ceiling on it or a floor on it, all you do is force the states to react in a different way, and you create a bigger mess than you had with Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, and in the case of California, I mean, you have a policy in place with the state of California. I think you know what you're getting. So as much as people get I get it. I understand why it is that people get very excited and emotional about it, and certainly women in their bodies. But I mean, I think you know what you're getting in California.
Yeah, well, in California, the right to choose is enshrined in our Constitution. 2022, they had a proposition on the ballot. It's now in our Constitution. And so to have the federal government come in and change the will of the voters in California, I think it's just a terrible thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I guess, comparisons between you and your opponent, because they really are different. Right?
Yeah.
So I guess talk about some of the things that people should be aware of that separate you from.
Well, probably the most interesting difference is he's a convicted criminal and I'm not, so we can start with that. But the people actually don't care that much about his DUI conviction, even though it was very irresponsible to run a red light at twice the legal limit at night with no headlights on in a state car. What they really care about is the crime that's affecting their own neighbors, their own neighborhoods. They care about the smash and grabs. They care about the murder at Fashion Island, the shooting at South Coast Plaza Mall, the smash and grabs at the Irvine Spectrum, the burglaries that are taking place all throughout Irvine. That's what they actually care about. My opponent and I are very different on that. He's soft on crime. He basically believes in no cash bail, let everybody out of jail. He believes in suppressing the criminal records of felons. So you can't even tell whether somebody's going to come work on your house. You do some research on them. You can't tell whether they have a criminal background or not, or a record. And so he's just soft on crime. And this soft on crime attitude in California has done what? It's given a green light to all the criminals to say, go ahead.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, go ahead. We're not going to prosecute it. Go. And then, of course, the more smash and grabs you have, the more opportunities, or not opportunities, that's the wrong word. It's the more circumstances where bad things will happen, like the shooting at Fashion Island. Actually, that was they tried to do a smash and grab, and they ended up running over her and dragging her and killing her.
Trying to steal a guy's watch or something.
Well, no, that was over at South Coast Plaza Mall. A friend of mine got shot over there. They tried to steal his watch, and he resisted, and they shot him. So the whole point is these are smash and grabs gone awry because we've given a green light to all the criminals to say, we're not going to prosecute this.
Right. If you feel like there's no repercussion for what I do, then I guess you invite the action.
Exactly right.
And it's interesting because in your district, I mean, Irvine historically for I don't know how many years.
Safest big city. Yeah.
That's the pitch. It's the safest city in the country. And then how could you not be tough on crime in that particular city?
So other differences are he's very soft on the border. He believes in open borders. I believe in a secure border, but I also believe in a wide gate, a tall fence and a wide gate. Barry, we're a generous country. We love immigrants. We allow over 1 million immigrants every year to come into this country. And so what we need to do is make sure the American citizens are protected too, and the taxpayers protected by having strong border security. It doesn't mean we're closing the border. It just means we're securing the border. We're keeping fentanyl dealers out. We're keeping drug dealers out. We're keeping sex traffickers out. And, hopefully we're keeping all the terrorists out.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I don't know why anybody'd have a different opinion of it.
Well, my opponent has an opinion of open borders. Then, of course, I don't think he has any restraint on spending either, which is part of the problem of Washington.
Yeah, and so if you go with the Democratic position and you lump your opponent in with the rest of that, then you'll be in favor of all the things we just talked about, which would be the higher taxes and sort of stymie on the economy. Yeah.
There's one thing, Barry, that I really like to promote, and that is because I think Congress has a little bit of a credibility issue in the sense that everybody is cynical about Congress. And one of the bills I want to pursue and advance is ban members of Congress from trading stocks with inside information. The average person in America looks at that and they say, how can that be? It's like these elitists. You're supposed to be a public servant, and you're going there, you're getting inside information, and you're getting rich. I mean, you call it the Nancy Pelosi Act or something, but it's just crazy that she sells all of her Visa stock right before the DOJ announces they're investigating Visa. It's like, well, that's no coincidence. That's insider trading. That would be illegal if you were inside the company to do. We should make it illegal for members of Congress to do it too.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then assuming that you get elected, what are some of the other hot buttons that you think are going to happen right away, in addition to what we've already just talked about?
Well, I think you're going to see a massive regulatory reform. I think the taxes are, if we extend the Trump tax cuts, that'll be one big job to do. And then you're going to see a massive regulatory reform where we unshackle the burdens of business off the backs of businessmen and businesswomen to let them be free to produce. And when you do that, you bring down inflation, you bring down the price of goods. And so I think you're going to see the extension of the tax cuts, regulatory reform, a secure border, more enforcement of the criminal statutes, and I think life's going to be really good.
Yeah, let's hope. I mean, knock on wood. Let's talk for a second, because I know there's been a lot of talk on the news about these tariffs that Trump talks about, right? And so there's two schools of thought. One is I implement the tariff so that it basically puts the U.S. economy and U.S. manufacturers on a better level with foreign, and then it taxes the foreign goods coming in so that we get some revenue from it. The flip side from the Democrats is that if you wind up taxing it, it's just bad for the economy because the consumer's going to pay more. And I'm curious your thoughts as to which story stands and which holds water and which doesn't.
So I think a tariff is nothing more than a tax. It drives the price of goods up, and generally I'm against tariffs. With that said, that doesn't mean I'm against all of Trump's tariffs. Because what Trump is basically saying is, if you're a country that has similar values to us, there's no reason for us to have trade restrictions. But if you're a country that's seeking to harm us, like China, like bringing synthetic fentanyl in and killing hundreds of thousands of people. By the way, do you know more people have died from opioid deaths in the last 20 years than died in all of our wars since the Revolutionary War? That's how bad that epidemic is. And so the point is, if you're intending to harm our country and you're not following our trademarks and our patents and our intellectual property and all of that, we're going to punish you with a tariff. We don't want your goods in here. And so there's a role for tariffs in some circumstances when you're dealing with a country that doesn't honor human rights and is screwing with the United States of America.
And do you think the American consumer winds up paying for it at the end of the day? Or is that just not true because the fact of the matter is we'll just make the goods here and people will buy it here?
Barry, I think the American families benefit from this because they won't be dying from fentanyl. I think the American consumer benefits because when you start honoring all the intellectual property and the trademarks and the copyrights and all the patents and all that, you end up with a more secure form of business, the business environment where people can go out and be free to produce and make those commitments, make those sacrifices, make those investments. But as long as China is playing their game, it disrupts and destabilizes everything related to their goods and services.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the whole thing also in terms of the economy teeters back to, I mean, they're all sort of intertwined in one way or another, right? I mean, if there's stability in foreign politics, then people can act accordingly. If you just don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East or Ukraine or North Korea, you wonder, right? Maybe you don't lose sleep about it every single night, but you wonder.
Yeah. And bear in mind, don't forget that tariffs often have a reforming effect too. So if they have the intended effect of changing behavior, that's a good thing too.
Yeah. And so all of that, mix it all up in a bowl, I guess, if you will, right? There's lots of things going on. In terms of your constituents here in Orange County, if I try and wrap it up, I mean, to me, the one of the big things of the economy here in Orange County, it is real estate, it is tourism, right? And it is the diversity of growth and new businesses that come out of innovation, right? We want to keep that going. And there has to be that continuous flow or get the flow back or increase it. And I think all of these things feed into what winds up happening here at home.
Yeah, you get that done by making sure our community is safe. You don't have criminals running rampant. You secure our border. You extend the tax cuts. You do some regulatory reform, and then guess what, Barry? I'll tell you what happens. There's no problem the American people can't solve. You just get government out of the way, they will solve the problem, from the deficit to the debt to all the other issues that we face. Government complicates it, gums it up. The American people know how to solve it. So that's what I'm for, the American people.
Yeah, and get in, roll up your sleeves, and try and get some stuff done. Right?
Exactly.
And people start believing again, and they'll act accordingly.
Right.
So Is there anything we haven't covered that you want people to know, either about the campaign or about yourself, or things that are important?
Yeah, well, listen, Barry, it's the election's 7 days away. Republicans are coming out strong right now. I encourage everybody to go vote and go vote early. Voting is secure, and you can also track your ballot in case you think that you have to vote at the polling place. You could turn your absentee ballot in. You go to the OC Registrar's website. There's a button there that says track my ballot. You go on, you put your birthday in, and it'll tell you that your ballot's been verified and it's in the count, ready to be counted. And so voting by absentee is pretty safe here in Orange County. I know Bob Page is a good registrar. I can't say that for all the other registrars across the country, but we have a good one here, and you can trust the system. So get out there and vote early. One of the reasons I like you to vote early, because we have a whole team of people going out and reminding people to vote. Well, the smaller that list is, the easier it is for us. And then, of course, we don't have to mail you or spend time trying to get you to vote if you're already going to vote. So that's what we encourage people to vote and vote early.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like the act of going to the ballot box and doing it. But the fact of the matter is, in today's economy, in today's environment, right,
Yeah.
you want your vote counted. You want to make sure it's secure. I think people can have comfort in knowing that. Just go ahead and make sure you vote. Whatever you do, just vote.
Yeah, and go to baughforcongress.com and check it out. And if you want to come out and help us get the vote out these last 7 days, let's do it. We probably should have 85% voter participation this year.
Which is super high, which is great.
Yeah.
And the website's just, once again, for folks out there, it's Baugh, Baugh, for Congress, FOR, Congress.com. If you want to find out any more information, we've covered a bunch of stuff here today. I certainly appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your views. And I wish you and your family and your campaign all the success. I've already voted, and so you got my vote.
Thank you, Barry.
We hope that everybody else does the same. So I appreciate you again, and we wish you all the best.
Perfect. Good to be with you.
Yeah. So real quick, before we duck out, Paul is waving at me that we are out of time, but I do want to make one last final plug. eveningforautismsocal.com, baughforcongress.com. Go to either of those websites. Check it out. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. We'll see you back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.